Hi and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to this video regarding randomness. So this is part 2, and we're going to look at wrapping a GUI around what we did before. So this is what we're going to be creating. This is the little GUI here with the upper limit and the lower limit for the y coordinates, and you can see our model at the moment is nice and straight. There is no randomness added to this path, so let's just hide those paths. So we've got our table end there, our epoxy table end, half the table, and we want to produce a nice random wave along here. So we can add the upper limit and the lower limit and hit random, and that will actually produce our random line, and we can choose which one we like. It's obviously configurable, so if I wanted to, I could actually increase or decrease this lower limit, and the same with the upper limit. And there we go. And if we want to reset the line, just hit reset, and the line is reset. So that's what we're going to do. So this is able to allow us to actually have it by the side of our model and actually run this. Word of advice is when you very first come in here, open up your path first and then close it, and that means that it will be all recognized. Otherwise you may get an error when you run this. I'll look at a way of resolving that at some point, but the video is a bit long and I'm thinking about doing a shorter version. So if I do a shorter version, there'll be a link here to the short version, so it's up to you to use the short version or sit through the long version which explains it in depth, and you'll be able to learn programming in Python along the way. So let's get to it. So if you're still with me, then you're obviously looking at the long version, so you want to learn a bit more about Python and how you would actually create this type of effect and actually get the, that was a horrible one, get this code that we did before in a nice GUI. So let's take you through, and we don't have to worry about the previous code that will be all explained next. If you like this video, please hit a like and also subscribe to the channel. I also have a Ko-Fi site where you can actually donate to my contributions to the community, and that's at ko-fi.com/mang0. So let's have a small recap of where we are. So I've got the report view open and the Python console, and those are available from View, Panels, Report View and Python console. Just make sure those are checked. And I've got my subtractive path here, so you can see there's a body with a pad, a subtractive pipe has been placed upon there, and we're using profile in there. So this one here, and a path. You can see that path there highlighted in green. Let's take that off so you can actually see it properly. So that sweeps that path through there. Now the path itself, come in here, we can see that we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points in the path, but we're only interested in the points along here. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points there. Now these have all got an index. The end ones have got an index of 7. So you can see when I move that in our Python console, we've got move point 7.1, and this is 7.2. So we'll move this, you'll see it come up 7.2 here. The points that we're interested in are the ones in the middle. So this will be 1, 3, 2, 3, 3, 3, and so on, all the way up to 5, 3. So we'll be moving those points with our script, and that's important because when we look at our script, you can see that we go into a range here. So we're looping over this portion of code here, which has been indented 5 times from range 1 to 6. So we always minus 1 from the actual end of our range. So that's the start and that's the finish. The first time it comes in here, our point is set to 1. We'll print our point. Let's just run this a second so we can see it output. There's the output down the bottom. So we can see the first time we come in is 1. So coming here, the point is 1. So we picked 1 from the range here. So that's our starting range. Comes in. It picks up the vector. So this is just a variable. But I set that variable to app.activeDocument sketch001.getPoint. So this gets the point. And I'm passing in the point, which at the moment is 1. And it's always 3, the points that I'm looking for, so the middle points. So this 3 here. So each time this goes in, so we're going 1, so this will pick up 0.13. So the first one. So actually on the ones that we want to pick up, so these, so 1, 2, 3, those there. So that'll pick up that vector. That's important because we need to actually set the actual point by using move point. So we need the x position of that vector, which we're not going to change, so that's going to keep the same, but we still need to store it. So I've stored that in a variable called x, and y I've randomized from a range of -10 to +10. So we look back at here. If we take this position along here, if you look down to the bottom, you can see that's 1.5 -0.00. So that's x and y, so y position of 0 in the middle. So I'm there, so it's 3.6 there. If I did the same down here, you'll see that I'm minus in the minus range. So it's going to +10 to -10. So it will actually cross this line. So that sets the y point. And then we actually affect that point by moving it, and we give it the index, what point it is. So this is, first time we're in here, it's 1, so the point is equal to 1. And then we give it a vector of x and y. So we've actually brought in x, which is the same as where it was before, but we've just affected the y. That loops over loops over 5 times, setting those points for each. And therefore we get this change in pattern each time we run this. So you can see it's changing in pattern. There we go. And last but not least, we use the app.activeDocument.recompute. That just refreshes the page. If we didn't have that, nothing would refresh on screen, and we'd have to actually use the edit refresh up there. So what I want to do now is actually get this into a GUI, because at the moment we have to flip back and forth from our macro to our display, and it's quite tiring going back and forth and not being able to see this update in real time. So we want this in a nice GUI. And also I'm going to make the GUI configurable, so we're going to look at changing these ranges here, and also maybe doing a reset on there, and we'll be talking about seeds as well, so I'll bring that in so we can actually recall some of the different effects we have, because at the moment we're running these and I might say, oh, I like that one, let's see what else we got, and then we get 6 or 7 presses down the line and we don't know the settings for the one that we actually liked, and because it's random there is no settings. But when you use a seed, you can actually recall the random settings, as we explained in the previous video, which can be quite confusing, because if you're seeding something and you can recall it, then it's not really random, but it's a set of random values that have been, I suppose, pre-created before, and depending on your range and your seed will actually generate those numbers. So let's get on to actually moving this to a GUI and see how we do. So we're going to keep this code here, but I'm just going to add 3 single quotes to the bottom and top, and what that does, it just rams out that. So if I run this now, nothing would actually happen. No code is actually being run because we've just rammed out the code, so it gets ignored. So that's a block comment. Single comments use the hash, and anything there will just get ignored as well. So I'm just going to lay down some code to actually produce the standard window that we used before in other videos, the Qt library or Qt library. So first thing I'm going to have to do is pull in that library from PySide, and this is the Qt GUI. So we're just pulling in the Qt GUI here. So from PySide.Qt GUI import, and we're importing style, which means we're importing all. Now I'm going to create a class, and this class I just can call it my window. You can call it whatever you want, but this is the class name. And if you use a bracket in here and use QWidget, we're actually extending the QWidget class. So PySide, as I said before in the other videos you looked at them, but if you use this, PySide is actually a library full of QTX, a Qt widget, Q GUIs, Q buttons, and you can actually extend these. So what I'm doing is just inheriting that in my code. So I'll be extending the Q widget and giving it extra functionality. It's like building a car. So you go off and get your kit car, you get your basic structure and your basic frame, and that's a Volkswagen frame or a BMW frame. So you got even a basic car there that's got, can drive, you can change gears. The stuff then you bolt on top of it, so you could have a Brabus kit that actually enhances the fuel consumption or enhances the speed or enhances the airflow. So that is basically an extension of the car. And though it's still a BMW underneath, you've got this Brabus kit that sits on top that's actually created something a bit more lively. So this is basically what we're doing. We're inheriting and extending. So with the class, put a colon in here, so anything that's tabbed in is part of the class. So the first thing I'm going to do is define the constructor. So this is basically a method that gets called each time this class or an instance of this class is created. And console, so I'm just going to output something to the console. Class created. So that creates that class. You can use single or double quotes for the actual string that you place in here. It doesn't matter. We need to actually create an instance of it as well. So I'm just going to use the variable MW my window equals my window, and let's clear everything. And you can see when I run it, that class is actually created now. So the next part of this is to actually inherit the methods and properties of QWidget. Although it's been pulled in, we haven't actually run QWidget to actually inherit any of that through. So you have to actually spark this up to actually pull in all your methods and functions. And we use that by issuing the command super. And my window, so that's the name of your class, which can be anything you call it, so supplement that with whatever you've called it, and pass in self. And I'll be talking about self in a minute, what that actually is, because I realised that in the other videos I haven't actually explained what self is, so I'll actually talk about self soon. So we need to run the actual init underscore and then open close bracket, and then we'll run self.show, because that's actually running a method on here. We can't see it because it's part of the QWidget. That's why we inherited it and made an extended our class to allow for that. Now, there's something not quite right, so let's put there should be a dot because we're running super, so super is our QWidget.init. So we'll run that, a window pops up, so that's that self.show running there. If we didn't run this, let's run that out, then we'll get an error down here. It's the same method of object-based class, my window not called. This gives a bit of a hint of what's going on, so that's good. So we've got that up. We need to actually stop that from disappearing now, so if I swapped over. You see our window's disappeared and we have to go off to find it. There it is. Let's close that down. So we need to actually pass it some tags. So in here we need self.setWindowFlags, and we pass it the flag qt.windowStaysOnTop hint, and that should force the window to stay on top. Also, let's give it a title. So self.setWindowTitle, and in there we can, let's make sure we spell it properly, and then there we can actually, in double quotes, we can give it the title to the window. So I'm just using random demo for that one. So when we run that, we've got our title, and now when we swap over to the tabs, that stays on top. So this is exactly what we need, because we'll be running from here and seeing the results appear over on the right or the left, depending on where we put this. We've got those in. Let's actually get some edit boxes in there so we can actually supply the top and bottom, or the upper and lower limits of this. So we add this as -10 and +10 for that range. So let's add those in. We'll make those variable. So self.show I'm going to leave as the last thing that we do. Now if I'm using self, then we're going to actually add something to this. So self dot, I'm going to call this whatever I want. So this is an edit box, so I'm going to use ed in there, just so I know what it is. I'm going to use y max, so that's the y plus there, and the y minus will be y min. This is the variables that I decided to use there. And we're going to use something called Q-line edit, because we haven't added that before. Normally I would use spin edits, but this time we're going to use a Q-line edit, so you know how to actually deal with these, because we would need to actually do some formatting on these to actually allow them to be converted to floats, etc. So we can use them as numbers in our top and bottom range. Now I'm just adding another Q-line edit here, so I'm going to edit y min equals Q-line edit. I've got two there that we're going to use, and I'm going to add them to a layout. So to get them on screen, we need to actually create a layout. So I'm just going to call the layout, well, layout, and that's going to actually be a form layout. So Q form layout. Now, good thing Q form layout is that you've got, once you set it up, or once assign it to your variable, which I've called layout, is that you've got layout.add row, and this takes two objects, and the first one can actually be text. So I'm just going to use text in here. I'm going to use upper limit y, so we get a text on that row. And then the next one I'm going to actually set to self.ed y max. So I'm adding the Q-line edit here, the self.ed y max, to that line with a label by the side of it. And we do the same on the next line. So layout.add row, and this is going to be, my spelling today is atrocious, lower limit y, and that's going to be the self.ed y min. Of course, that we've got the layout set up, but we can't see it at the moment because we need to actually add it to the actual window. So self.setLayout, this is what we've all pulled in, all the methods and properties. So self.setLayout, and then you just add it layout in there. Let's have a quick look through, hit run, and you can see we've got the upper limit and lower limit there all ready to go. And as you can see, it's going to be much more easier to change this. Right, what else I need in there is some buttons, because obviously when we add these in, we need to actually have a button to click on for the path to change, the random values to take effect, or the random values to be generated, and also a reset buttons to zero them back. So for that I need to actually set up a button. So I'm going to have self dot, I'm going to call it btn randomize, and that's going to be a Q push button, and I'm going to call it generate or randomize. Let's go for randomize. So let's create the button. Also I want a button for the reset, so self btn reset, and that's also going to be a Q push button. And again we're going to actually open the bracket and put some text in there called reset, or whatever we want to call it there. So we've got those two buttons there. Now what I want to do is add them to this layout, but if I add them to this layout now, it's going to be looking a bit odd, because if I add a row, you'll notice that because of the actual form layout, you will notice that it will be resized oddly, and because they all go into I can't type and talk at the same time, because they all go to a standard layout. So the first thing that goes in, everything will be kind of resized to that, or the largest thing, the largest object in the actual form. Soft button resize, soft button randomize. So when we run that, you'll see what I mean in a minute, and that's the reason why I don't talk when I actually self dot button resize, self dot button reset, not reset. It's because I was talking about what happened there. That was interesting. Self dot button reset. That's because I was talking about reset, resizing, when I was actually trying to type reset. So there we go. So you can see the randomize is smaller than the reset, because the reset is actually resized to the largest item there, that button there. And we can get around that by actually creating this in the new layout. So I don't think I've mixed layouts before in my previous video, but I'm going to show you how to do that now. So we don't want that one. Get rid of that. If we have one button in here, then it will span across that row, those two rows. And this is what we want to do. We actually want to create a new layout that spans across those two rows, but put a button in that layout, and therefore it'll be nicely centered in the actual layout. So what I'm going to do is come in here, and we're going to call this a control layout. Call it whatever you want, but this is where my controls are going to sit. And I'm going to use a horizontal box layout, so QH box layout here. And to that control layout, I'm going to add a widget, and I'm going to add each of these buttons. So we have to do this one by one. So add widget, there we go, that one, and we'll create another one down here, and we need to add the button reset, not resize, reset that, and then we can come into our layout and actually add a row and pass in the actual control layout. So we're passing in that control layout there. So what that will do, that should center that nicely. So our two buttons have been added, and that should center it in there. And there we go. You can actually see they're both the same size. These obviously don't do anything at the moment. We'll hook those up in a minute. So we can actually hook those up now. So what I'm going to do is come in here, and just delete one. So I'm in line with that method now, that method definition. So I'm creating a new method, and I'm going to call this method reset. So this is for the reset button. I'm going to place self in there because we'll need that. And I think what I'm going to do is just output console.print message, and we'll say reset clicked. And this is a good time to actually talk about self after I've actually put the other one in, which is going to be the randomize, for the randomize button. So self. So you can see I'm actually passing in to this method the word self each time. Now there is a reason for that. That is, self can be actually called whatever you want, but it's standard to use the word self in there. You could use underscore this, me, my, whatever you want. It's just a standard to use self in there. And there is a reason why you have to pass in self. So let's have a look. Where's our buttons? Let's keep it all together. Let's keep it all together. So self dot button randomize, and I want on the clicked method, and I want to connect, and I'm going to connect the randomize method down here. So in here I just pass in self dot randomize, and I'm going to do the same with the reset button. So I'm just going to copy that line and change self.randomize to self.reset, and in here reset. So I've actually connected those buttons up. I've just ran that and I've noticed I've forgotten the colons on the end of here. So those should now, there we go, randomize, it's coming out, randomize down here, and reset. So when Python decided to do methods, they decided to do them in a different way to most programming languages. The instance of what the method belongs to is automatically passed in Python, hence the self, but it's not received. So you actually have to actually place self here, but you can actually call this without actually passing in self. So it's automatically passed along even though you don't actually supply it, but you have to actually supply it in your method signature here to actually receive it, if that makes any sense. So the first parameter in the actual method is the instance the method is called on. So if I actually wanted to run this down here, this reset in here after the actual initialization is done, or on the initialization, I wouldn't come in here and use reset, self. So I'm actually saying this class here, self dot reset. I wouldn't actually pass in self here because that is not needed. Now we've got a problem here. So you got a problem there already. If you take that out, I know there's self there, and you would actually think, well, you need to pass something in. It's automatically get past the line because we're actually calling it on self anyway. So if we run that, there we go, reset clicked. So that's the actual instance of this method where it belongs to, in other words, self. It actually gets passed along automatically, but you have to actually say in the method that it's being received, and no, it's not passed in the brackets. So let's clear this off, and carry on. Now we've got the two methods here, so let's start padding out these methods. Now remember that we're using Q-line edits, and before I said that I would normally use a spin edit in here, so a spin edit that actually produces an integer value or a numeric value, so we don't have to worry about converting them. But the reason why I've used Q-line edits is because I can actually show you what you would do to go about to convert these. So I want to convert these to a numeric value. Now we can actually use, for these Q-line edits, we need to work out what precision we're using. So I'm allowing us to use actual precision in here, so like 1.2, 1.25, 1.256, etc, etc. So supplying a decimal point, so I'll be using floats in here, the float type, because that allows us precision, the same as the double type. And what I'm going to do is come into the randomize method, and in here we're just going to tab over and we're going to create a variable. So I want the y max in here first, so this is the upper limit we're supplying, and I need to convert that edit box that's coming in, the actual text from that edit box, to a float. So we just use float, and whatever inside the brackets gets converted to a float. And I want self.edy max dot text, open and close brackets. So that will convert whatever's in the text box to a float. I'm going to use y min as well. So we've got y max and y min. So if I think about it, we've also got this reset here as well. Random piece of code, which is at the top, goes for each of the points and set those to a random in a random range. The other thing we've got to think about is reset, because we're going to go through each of these and set them all to the y-axis of 0. So we would want to reuse code where possible, so I'm going to actually call another method to actually do the setting of the values, and I'm going to call that set point values. And in here we need again to pass self, and I'm going to pass the min and the max. I remember the colon this time. We'll just output what's coming in first, and I'm going to put min and convert, add plus and str min in there, add a plus and put a space in there, comma, max. So this is just some text output, and convert max to a string. So just concatenating the string together and outputting a message. At the moment that's not actually being called, so I want to actually call it. So I'm going to call it from the randomize. So I call self.setPointValues, and I want to pass in ymin and ymax. And what I'm going to do up the top as well, so in here actually call that as well. So if I come in here, now 0 is a value, so we don't want to call it with 0. I'm just going to call it with none in here, so no value at all. Because if we start placing 0 in here, then it starts getting complicated. We need to actually define null values or no values against actual proper values. So 0 would be an actual proper value, because you can actually go 0 to 12, or if you want to. So just going to pass none and none in there. So at the moment this is still working. So if our upper limit is 10 and our lower limit is minus 10, and we'll go randomize, we can actually see that we've got randomize min minus 10 and the max is 10 there. let's just add a new line onto the end of there. So there we go. So we'll clear this, and we don't need this class created anymore. I'm going to get rid of the reset, and I'm going to get rid of the randomized message. It's nice and clean, so we can actually run that. So at the minute it's actually running it with min none, max none. So that would actually, if we run that, that would actually set, because we've got the self.reset in there, that will actually set that line to 0, which is a nice accident, but we're going to leave that there. So that will actually zero out that line. And we hit randomize. Nothing's happened at the moment. Hit reset. That's all. What we do is cast that, so we need to actually to a variable as come in here and have a look what's happened. So we just hit randomize without any values, and we passed in the edit values. Now what would have happened here is, because it's trying to convert basically blank text to a float, and it's not showing the error, but it actually is error in here. So I'm going to wrap this in an error block. So this is a try block. So what it will do, it will try anything in this block here, and anything that fails in here will go down to the exception, or the accept. And we can come in here and place in app.console. I'm going to say print error rather than print message, so this will come up in red. I'm going to put in the text, valid text input. Please try again. There we go. So run that now. Hit randomize. You can see that an error has occurred. It's saying please try again. We can actually output the error here as well, because we've got set here. We can actually, it's actually pulling up an internal error message, but we're not actually outputting the error message, and we can actually do that. And we need to actually catch that error message, so it's an exception that actually happens. So exception. And what I'm going to do is actually replace this invalid text to that with the E there. And then when we run this, hit randomize, go down to the bottom, so that can't convert that to a float. So that's done. So we've got a bit of error checking in there, and that will just halt that any exception. So when we get to here, if that failed, which it is doing, it'll just jump down here and do that last, or anything that's indented under a section in here. So there's a bit of an error checking for you. So we can carry on with code in here. We actually branch off here to this one. So if they were okay, so let's put upper limit as 3, lower limit as 1, and randomize, you can actually see that's going in there. So now we've got our basics down. We've got our window with 2 buttons and edits to actually allow for user input. So let's get our original code back in. So go up to the top, and we've rammed this out, so we need this from random range in there. So I'm going to stick that at the top, so that's gone. So we don't need that anymore. And I'm going to cut this code out along with the recompute. Let's get rid of those rem marks. And we're looking to dump this somewhere, so this set point values, it's a perfect place to place that. So we're going to come in here and just paste that code in, and we're going to tab it over so it's in line. Now we've got to make some adjustments in here because we've got a range that's sitting here that takes 1 to 6. So this is our points that are coming in, so that's fine. I'm going to leave the print point in there. That's all good. Now there's our range. So we need to change that to min and max. So min and max. So that's sorted those two out. And I've got an idea that's the only thing we have to change. So we run that now. We've got an error coming in. So let's clear this out. Could not convert to a string. Okay, so upper limit is 1. Lower limit is -1. Hit randomize. So we should be okay. Don't know where that arrow come from. Let's give it some decent values. So upper limit 10, lower limit -10. Randomize. And there we go. So we can see, hitting random, we've now got our GUI working. And if we hit reset, we've got to hook up this reset now. So let's do that next. Right, so we need to actually, because the prints aren't coming out, we need to actually replace those with app.console.print messages, because the print is actually out of scope. So we just replace those. So we can actually see those come up on screen. So when we run it, we've got a problem there, and that is pretty probably because cannot convert to floats. So that's cool. So let's just place that in there. -10. So you can actually see the points are now coming out. Now we have an error straight away, and that's because of this self.reset. And when that's passed, we've got none and none coming in, and set points none and none. Well, you can't actually do that. So we need to actually come in here and work that out, because that will actually sort out our reset as well. So we've got the X random range in there. So what I'm going to say, if min doesn't equal none, and then we'll do this. Otherwise we'll set y to 0. So we'll come in here and go if min equals none, then y equals 0, remembering the colon in the end, and then we're going to use an else in there. So else y equals round range, and a colon on the end of that as well. So now if, well, the minute that's run, you can see no errors come up. So that's actually working, which is good. And what will happen is that it's actually ran that piece of code and zeroed off this as well. The reason why there's a slight bend in there is because our X and Y for that path, see those are all zeroed, that one's not actually on 0 there. So let's move those down, that one up a bit. There we go. So that's nice and straight now. So go into our macro, run the macro, zero all the paths, and if I hit randomize, then it's going to come up, could not convert to a string to a float, which is correct. And we can put our 10 and -10 in here and randomize those. And hitting reset will just straighten that off. So that's it for this video, but there's going to be another video coming up soon regarding the random seeds, and also talking about what we did last time in that little task that was in there if you chose to have a go at it, and that was regarding creating a B block and randomizing the holes in that B block and how you go about that. And we'll be taking the original code and actually transforming that slightly. There is going to be some more modeling videos about the epoxy board, because there is about 3 or 4 ways to do this, and I think they're worth going into. Also, there's going to be a modelling video coming up regarding the B block and actually making a mould to create concrete or clay B blocks, even paper mache or biodegradable material that you want to place in there. The reason why I'm doing it is because I have a bee's nest in the garden. It's a bumblebee's nest, and obviously after the winter they need somewhere to go, so I need to create a few blocks in there because I want them to return next year. Okay, so look out for those videos soon. If I get time to do them today, they'll be on my channel sometime later on, the same day. If not, you're going to see them in about a week's time, because I've got quite a few things lined up in the channel. Thanks a lot. Thank you for the subscriptions. Thank you for the views, and I'll see you next time.